After years of waiting, Dune Part 2 is finally here, and it is glorious! Before I get into my thoughts of this review, make sure to comment down below. Let me know your thoughts if you've seen it already or if you're looking forward to checking it out this weekend. In Part 2, we pick up right where we left off. Paul Atreides has united with Chani, Stilgar, and the Fremen, learning their ways, becoming one with their people, all while actively seeking revenge against the Harkonnens for destroying his family. Still plagued by troubling visions of the future, Paul is battling his own inner conflict as well as the growing prophecy of his higher calling. To say I was excited for this movie would be an understatement. It was my most anticipated movie of the year, and I had a lot of hope riding on this movie being good. When Part 1 released back in 2021, I was thoroughly impressed and surprised with how much I really enjoyed that movie. I enjoy the sci-fi genre to a certain degree, but when it comes to the big sci-fi franchises like Star Wars, for example, while I can appreciate the craft, I've never been able to connect with those movies on the same level as so many other people. But Dune for me is my Star Wars. It does for me what Star Wars does for many of you. When it comes to the mythology and the world building, everything that represents Dune and its lore and what it represents is 100% my thing, and I connected with it on a level far greater than I ever expected to. And for me, when it comes to Dune Part 1, it set a very high bar, a bar that I was nervous and wasn't very sure whether it could be crossed, whether it could be even met to the same level with Part 2. But I'm happy to say that, man, Dune Part 2 surpassed the first one in nearly every way. What Dune Part 1 did so well that many people had issue with to a certain degree was establishing the world, establishing the laws of the land and how everything operated, these different people, these different houses, and the political structure of it all. It took on the heavy task of introducing this world, introducing the ideologies, and also getting us connected with all of these characters. For anyone who didn't read Frank Herbert's novel, myself included, I feel like it did the perfect job at just getting us caught up to speed with everything in the system and the mechanics behind it all to really get on board with the story, so then future installments could only expand and grow from that. And that is exactly what Dune Part 2 delivers on. Now, say what you want about the first movie, one thing that we can all agree on is that it was a technical marvel. The things that they were able to do, the things that they were able to bring to life and show us on the screen were some of the best in the sci-fi genre ever on a technical level. Somehow, Part 2 is even bigger, it's even more bold in its visualization of this world, and it brings to life everything in such a vivid, detailed, epic way. The scale of this thing is enormous from head to toe. Denis Villenueve is just a visionary when it comes to the sci-fi genre and bringing these stories to life. And adapting Dune is a very hard task. In fact, in the past, people have said that it was unadaptable, that Frank Herbert crammed so much lore, so much knowledge, so much depth into his novel that there was just no way that it could be brought to life and be as effective. But somehow, he brought this world to life to be fully realized, fully lived in, and while you're watching and experiencing these movies, you feel fully immersed and like you're a part of it all. And the way that they're able to blend physical landscape with just top-notch cinematography and visual effects, it creates an atmosphere that is simply unmatched and has never been brought to the big screen at this level, at this capacity, with this amount of attention to detail. And while there were some memorable action sequences in the first movie, this takes it up to a whole other level. You could argue that this is almost a war film because it is about the war against the Fremen and the Harkonnens. The Harkonnens are trying to take full power. They're trying to exterminate the Fremen people altogether, and there's no holds barred whatsoever. Every act of this movie had a memorable action sequence that was big, that was loud, that was exciting, that was engaging at a scale that is unlike anything I've ever seen. And it's a movie that is begging to be seen on the biggest screen possible with the best sound system possible for that full immersive experience. There were moments throughout this movie to where I was simply sitting there in awe of what I was watching, just trying to soak it all up. my heart was racing, I was sweating, and I was just sitting there thinking, man, I'm watching something truly special, something that I'm not going to see many other times at the movies. It really was just a unique experience, one that it's a once in a lifetime thing. There's not a lot of movies that come around today, and very few that I can see coming around in the future that are going to have this same impact at this big of a scale. And while the action and the spectacle of it all is super impressive, I think this movie works even better as a character study. The performances across the board are top rate. There's not a single bad performance in this entire movie. We have the entire cast from the end of the first movie returning for this one, as well as a few newcomers in the mix. Obviously, we have Christopher Walken in there, Florence Pugh, Austin Butler. I want to highlight Austin Butler for a moment because I think there was speculation after his success with Elvis that was it for him, that was his peak, and people weren't really certain what level of longevity he was going to have in the industry post Elvis. He was nominated for an Oscar, got a ton of critical acclaim, but what was he going to do after that? He ended up embodying one of the greatest villains we've ever seen put to screen, Fade Rautha. Now, I don't know how true his portrayal was to the book and its source material, but for me, his character worked on every single level, and I seriously cannot think of another actor stepping in his place and giving as much of an impactful performance as he did. He just oozes that menacing, frightening, threatening eeriness. Every moment he's on screen, he demands 100% of your attention, and he can carry an entire scene just with his body movements, his line delivery, his facial expressions. There are moments in this movie to where he is not saying anything at all. He is simply present in the foreground or the background of a scene, yet he still begs for your attention because he just has that presence. There are moments throughout where he is completely unrelenting, whether that be moments of action or simple monologues. I don't know, I couldn't look away. It really blew me away with how effective his character was. And there are moments as the film builds later on, towards the third act of the movie, where you really see his character in full-fledged psychotic mode, and it's just peak acting. Austin Butler, good job. Javier Bardem is also someone I want to highlight here. I think he was very subdued in the first movie, but here he gets a little more time to shine, and he often plays as the comedic relief, which, when you think about Dune and how dense it can tend to be, it's sort of odd to think that there is any comedic relief whatsoever, but the way that it was incorporated and the way that Javier sort of delivered that comedic relief was a very nice touch. It really added some sense of levity in very dark moments at times. While Zendaya didn't get much of a play in the first movie, she has her moments, but it is not her movie. It's not focused on her. She is sort of more so part of the overarching theme than actually part of the narrative itself. But here, I think she is the emotional anchor of the film, and she provides plenty of moments that are just very engaging, and they make you think, and you can tell that her character is very torn with this part of the journey and where her character is going to go next. And there's many layers to it. It is a very subdued at times, but also intense performance when it needs to be, and I really feel like all of the emotional beats throughout the movie rely on her character and are on her character's shoulders, and she carries it extremely well. And honestly, I think Timothee Chalamet gives his best performance today. If there was any doubt beforehand if he was going to be able to carry a franchise to this capacity with this amount of weight, then I think all of that doubt has been dismissed at this point. He has proved that he can be subdued, but also command complete control when needed. And honestly, his arc is one of the most interesting character arcs I've ever seen put to screen. There's so much discussion throughout the entirety of this movie. Is he the chosen one? Is he not? Is there weight behind these visions he sees of the future? Is he going to pursue his destiny, or is he ready for it yet? It takes the typical chosen one story archetype that we've seen in plenty of films in the past, but it really adds a level of depth to it that we haven't seen to this level before. And as the film progresses, his journey becomes more interesting, more complex, and there are certain shifts, especially towards the end of the second act, that will get you fully on board with his character if you weren't prior, but also make you question some things. This is a movie that makes you think a lot. This movie has a lot to say about faith, blind religion, fundamentalism, and finding one's own way in a path paved with greed, anger, and fear of the unknown. That's one of the things I appreciate the most about it, is that it treats the audience like they are smart, like they are educated, and that we can handle something grander, narratively speaking, than just big explosions on the screen. It's a sci-fi movie with a heart and a soul. And for me, that's what works with these types of movies. Sure, the scale is impressive. The cinematography by Greg Fraser is unmatched. The sound design, the world building, all of that. There's no comment that can be made other than that it's top tier. We haven't seen anything to this level before. But the amount of depth that Denis took in really establishing the narrative and the thematics behind it all and the mechanics that make the entire world work is what's most impressive to me. And this movie's almost 3 hours long. And there are a lot of films, especially in this genre, that tend to reach that point to where I begin to lose interest, where I feel like they could have trimmed some of the fat. That is not the case with this movie. I'm not saying that it's brisk. I'm not saying that it flies by. I'm saying that, in my opinion, it was perfectly calculated. In 2 hours and 45 minutes, there is not a single second wasted on developing this world to its fullest extent. It takes time with these characters. It's very meticulous with the way that the story progresses. Every character, every individual story element is given enough time to be fully realized and developed. I think it was just as long as it needed to be to tell the story that they wanted to tell. Overall, I was simply blown away with this movie. Walking out of it, I was on cloud nine. I think it is simply one of the best sequels ever made, definitely one of the best sci-fi films ever made, definitely one of my favorites personally, and one that I can't wait to keep going back and revisiting again and again and continue to unpack this world and the story that this thing is telling, because it is pretty dense, but everything that's packed into this runtime is so impactful. It's a feast for the eyes and for the mind. So with all that being said, I'm gonna have to give Dune Part 2 a 10 out of 10.
It was perfect. Perfect. Everything.
Guys, as always, thank you so much for watching this video. As I said in the beginning, make sure to comment down below. Let me know your thoughts on the movie. Let me know, did you like it as much as I did? Because a 10 out of 10 is a very high rating, but for me, I think that is extremely deserved, but I'd love to hear your opinion. Also, if you would, make sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe if you haven't already. And until next time, I'll see y'all later. Peace out. That's how it's done, folks. That's how it's done.